Bonjour. First of all, thank you. Thank you and welcome to PSA. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to have this chat about connectivity, about smart cities, data management. All of this is something that we at PSA are very focused on, and we would like to understand many of the implications of what we are currently preparing in terms of technology. One of the questions I wanted to ask you today, which is eventually a rather tricky question, and I apologize for that. I think it's going to be a good point for discussion, is when we look at all of this connectivity, when we look at this continuum from home, office, mobility device, we wonder if by having this permanent connectivity, we are not completely losing the battle of privacy. And I wanted to ask your opinion about this. And what are the implications if we feel that we have lost the battle of privacy? Then what does it mean? Or does it mean that we need to restrict some of the developments that we have ongoing in terms of data management using the mobility devices? What do you think about it?
It's so interesting that this question comes from your side, because I originally wanted to ask you how you deal with that. Because I think you're mentioning a core issue we have when it comes to the design of smart systems or smart solutions or anything that is related to digitization. Everything becomes very transparent, and I currently don't see a solution to prevent transparency or too much transparency. And you know, I'm coming from Germany, and we have some issues with data protection and privacy, because in our recent history we saw cultures of control, cultures of distrust, cultures with a lack of freedom, of control, and even with cultures of inhumanity. And this is very well connected to too much control. And this is why we are struggling so hard to be in line with the principles of our constitution. And regarding to the development of smart city solutions, we have to have an eye on that, because the system design requires the consideration of those principles in order to help us to remain our idea of a good life. And this good life is very close to privacy and freedom and control. So if it comes to system design, we definitely have to think about that. And we have to, especially in Germany and Europe, we have to develop an attitude towards these aspects.
I completely understand what you say. And when I look at what's going on right now with all the regulations in terms of data management and privacy-related data management, we see that any big corporation like ours will make sure that we tick all the boxes. But we also see that as users, as citizens, as consumers, many times when we are looking at our screen, we click on the accept box just because there is such a huge page of small letters and small sentences that we don't bother to read. So at the end of the day, we want to access to the service, or we want to access to the information, and we will quite easily click on that box, perhaps without really understanding what we are clicking on. And
we never understand it. There's a negative trade-off between comfort and security.
Exactly. So the convenience factor will be stronger than the protection factor.
It's always like this.
Right. Which means that answering this question about the real battle of privacy cannot be only regulation. It has to be something else. And this is something that in spirit, in terms of ethical behaviors, so far I don't think that we, the society, have found out what is the right solution. But we see that the permanent connectivity and the permanent access to service is going to trigger this kind of situation where, yes, we give you the sense that we protect your data, and there are a lot of firewalls and a lot of rules and regulations. And by the way, if you want to access this service that you want to access to, you have to tick and accept. So at the end of the day, what is the sincerity of this trend? To which extent are people going to trust this? And I must say that at this stage, even of course, we are prepared to tick all the boxes in terms of rules and regulations. As a citizen, I wonder if this privacy battle is not in the course that is going to be, at the end of the day, lost. And I wonder if our citizens would accept that. And you said that at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to have a good life. And I agree with you. That's the ultimate goal that a human being is looking for. And the automotive industry, we have the same open question for freedom of mobility. We're talking about protecting the privacy. On the other side, the raison d'être of our company is to ensure freedom of mobility. And we see that when we say, well, freedom of mobility is a right, anybody living in a free society wants to protect this freedom of mobility, but we also see that when we pile up all the things that we mean in terms of conditions for the mobility, in terms of safety, cleanliness, convenience, comfort, etc., we tend to reach a point where freedom of mobility depends on your economical power. And you see
this always has been the case.
Always been the case. So if you pile up a freedom of mobility that is going to be more and more dependent on your economical power to buy a very sophisticated mobility device, and if on top of that you have a privacy which is going to be challenged by the fact that your very costly mobility device, clean, safe, comfortable, convenient, etc., is going to be continuously connected by construction, what does that say in terms of what are our society expectations? Are we moving away from offering freedom of mobility with a good level of privacy to the biggest part of the society, or are we just ensuring that this freedom of mobility with a significant level of privacy is going to be limited to part of the society? And I would like to get your perspective on this.
This is a very huge question.
It is.
Let me take one aspect you mentioned before. You mentioned that the citizens have to be smart enough to use the gadgets. And I think it is very important to enable the people to become smart citizens. And that requires a certain education, how to deal with gadgets, how to deal with terms and conditions, how to use your own data. This needs a certain kind of education. On the other hand, we need the regulation you mentioned. And the third aspect is the development. So this is something that comes together. We all have to be educated in a certain way to deal with these developments we're expecting now or designing currently. However, to come back to your original question, I mean, all of us know that the democratization of mobility is one of the big achievements of the last century. And when we see what's going on within the cities now, who are really struggling with the problems of air quality and land use, we see that they take measures which are very tough measures. It started in 2016 with the first entry ban, city tolls, charging, congestion charges, entry bans, stuff like this. And I mean, this brings a little bit of relief on the one hand. On the other hand, it leads to a de-democratization of mobility. And I think our task, and especially the past task of the automotive industry, should be to consider that and to find ways to enable mobility to remain democratized and to democratize it even more, because we get the chance to integrate more and more user groups into the mobility systems. It will be a task of the automotive industry and for the car manufacturers to help to ensure that we move on in this right direction. And there will be more and more user groups and customers. Just think about the demographic change, yeah? Who have to be integrated in a mobility system without being able to use cars or to use public transport systems. They will require new services. They will require new ways of mobility. We have to take care for that. And on the other hand, you are absolutely right, mobility will be more and more related to the use of data, because we have so many data streams in and out of the car in all directions, between the car and the infrastructure, between the infrastructure and the car, between the passenger and the internet, and the other way, the OEM wants to talk to the passenger, and in the end we get so many data that are interesting to so many people that we can make money with it. This is actually a new sector we are dealing with. And the problem will be to find solutions to create something like a private space within the car, because as far as I can see, there won't be any way to bring a situation of something like an anonymous mode into the car, because we will be tracked. The car will be part of the Internet of Things, and we will know who is inside the car and where he's going. So I think this will be one of the biggest challenges, or we should accept it, or we should find other ways to integrate anonymous vehicles within the traffic.
What you say is absolutely really exciting, because I think you are answering the first question, which was, are we losing the battle of privacy? And your point is to say, well, how can we restore some privacy inside of a fully connected car? And how can we teach people to manage the data, because they have to be in certain control of the data that they generate. But now there is a new service, which is I can offer you to recreate an anonymous environment in which you are sure that you can protect your privacy. So protecting your privacy becomes something that has a value. That's a value. And that's interesting, because first, we are not thinking about recreating right now an environment where privacy would be restored just because there is no data management or no data generation, for instance, which means that eventually we should think about a car where you disconnect everything. There is an anonymous mode where you say, well, if I push this button, then everything stops.
I pay for my privacy.
I pay for my privacy. And that is really interesting, because if I have to pay for my privacy because there is value in ensuring my privacy, and somebody is going to find the appropriate software or the appropriate technology to restore that privacy if I wish so, and therefore I will be able to sell that privacy. It also means that if you accumulate freedom of mobility, which is, again, clean, safe, comfortable, and private, again, we are increasing the cost of private mobility. That's what it means. It means that assuming that the technology is there, assuming that the business models are going to be imagined, it means that more and more, if you want to be mobile in a safe manner, in a sustainable, clean manner, in a comfortable manner, and in a private manner, then that has a value, which means some people will have to pay for it and some people will not have to pay for it. What does it mean in terms of democratization of the mobility for our society?
I absolutely agree what you're talking about. I think this will happen in any regard of a smart city. We are currently doing research in 18 different infrastructure sectors, and you can have this point of view in any infrastructure sector. And I think that our society did not reach the point yet to understand that the value of data. But this point will be reached. After revelation comes enlightenment, and sooner or later this will also apply to our customers. And at that point they will say, okay, you want to know where I'm going to, so I want to be paid for that information.
Yes.
This will be enabled by blockchain technology. This will be enabled by distributed ledger technologies, and we will see micropayments which enable these kind of transactions. And this will boost our economy in an incredible way. But at that point of time, we also will see people who sell their information in order to manage the struggle of life.
Exactly.
And we have some working poor in our society, in the middle of our society, in Europe, not somewhere in some developing countries, between us. And sometimes they have 2 or 3 jobs in order to manage their life, and they still cannot afford the things one would expect to have in Europe. And those people will have the opportunity to sell their information. And I'm worrying about the development of a data precariat. Those are people who sell their data in order to be able or to have a livelihood. And this is something we should prevent, because I think privacy shouldn't be something we are paying for, but privacy is a part of our constitution. Privacy is a right. But I don't know how we will manage it within a smart city or within an intelligent car.
And I couldn't agree more with you. From an ethical viewpoint, if you sell the data, which of course describe your lifestyle as something that has value for marketing and for other businesses, you should not have to do it because you need to make sure that you can afford your own living. And I think that from an ethical perspective, it's a big problem. On the other side, if we say that only people who have economical power can pay for their privacy, it's again reinforcing this disconnect within the society, the fragmentation of the society. And here what I see is, once again, we are in our Western societies not able to think and mature the ethical questions as fast as the technology develops itself. Technology development is going faster than the human being's ability to mature, think about ethics and say, no, this is going to go in the wrong direction because we are going to lose control. And this is one of the reasons why I believe today there is a huge political leadership crisis in the world, including in Europe, is because things are going so fast that we see that even the political leaders cannot absorb all of these changes and take the necessary conclusions out of the side effects that they want to control. And we can feel that. And again, talking about, sustainable and clean mobility, we clearly see that the zero-emission mobility is going to become an affordability mobility issue only because the technology is there. We are bringing the electric vehicles, the plug-in hybrids of the world, all of this as a very significant cost. And either we ask the customer to pay, and then it becomes sustainable mobility that is only accessible to the wealthy, which is a problem, or we keep it at a lower price and then we put ourselves in the red and we have to restructure our companies and we create, of course, a social issue. So in both cases, the clean, sustainable, safe mobility translates into an economical problem that at the end of the day is paid by the society in a way or another. And that comes from the fact that we are not able to embrace these problems on a 360-degree approach. We just look at this problem, then we want to fix it here, but it has impacts everywhere else, and nobody is embracing the full scope of the problem we want to fix for the society. And I think data management is very similar, where, yes, of course, it has a value. Of course, at one point in time, somebody will define this data belongs to the car maker, to the driver, to the owner of the car, to the user of the car. So who is the owner of the data? And then if that has some value, you can sell. But by the fact of selling, you give up on your privacy because You are giving a picture, a profile of your lifestyle. And if you want to protect your privacy, you have to pay for it. So again, it brings us again to the wealth power of the user that can afford or not to have the privacy. So I think that's something that people like you could help us enormously by being ahead of the wave and giving us the sense, or giving the political leaders the sense of what are the negative side effects that we should try to avoid. And the one you mentioned is absolutely, for me, paramount.
Can we stick a moment to the topic of urban mobility?
Sure.
Because I think, and this is a core question I'm dealing with every day, we really have to consider now how, or to ask ourselves how we can start a reorganization of urban mobility. And this is something which is so important for the OEMs, because we need you in the teams which will be dealing with this topic. I think that we need a complete and determined reorganization of urban mobility. And this has to be done in a very holistic way. We have to consider the city center of big cities and smaller cities or rural cities. We have to consider the connection between cities, the connection between the country and the city-country continuum. We have to consider so many different aspects. And within the city, we have to consider all different means of transport. We need to think about intelligent transport systems. We need to find a way to integrate the information about the different ways to be mobile in certain platforms, like you do it with Free to Move, yeah? And this requires collaboration, integration of the available solution. That means, first of all, identification of the available solutions. And then we need coordination. We don't need too many people who just start a bike sharing system, a car sharing system, a scooter sharing system, and leave our cities even fuller. We need coordinated solutions which go hand in hand in order to bring something out which is something like the dishwasher in a crowded kitchen. Yeah? This requires leadership. And this leadership has to come from the municipalities, from the governments.
You see, I think your point is extremely fundamental. It starts from where is right now in our Western system, where is the vision for the destination of a happy livelihood in a low-carbon society? It starts from there. What's the vision? What is the kind of society where we could have a happy livelihood with a low-carbon society? Then from there, we should extract, now if you want to live in an urban area within this society which has a low-carbon footprint and generates happiness for the citizens, then how you organize the city. And your point is totally on the spot. We have started with a very, very wrong foot on this matter.
Who is we?
We, the society.
Okay.
The society. Why? Because the guys who are supposed to have the scientific power to bring the technological solutions for this kind of problem are the guys who are considered by the society as being the crooks.
Yes.
I mean the car makers, because of the problem that happened with one of our car makers. So because of this specific problem, the whole industry was bashed, and all the regulators consider that we are all crooks, and they impose on us one given technology without using or leveraging the full scientific power of our companies. If you take just the European automotive industry, you will find more than 150,000 engineers. These 150,000 engineers are not challenged in their imagination, their creativity, to find the best possible solution to coordinate the mobility inside of an urban area.
It's not the task of an engineer.
That's the task for somebody who understands how people want to live in the city. And I agree with you on the fact that we're not talking about emissions only, we're talking about footprint of the mobility devices on the city and how you coordinate the multimodal mobility in the city. So this thinking, the brainstorming about how we are going to organize a city within which we can be mobile, of course in a safe way and a zero emission way, blah, blah, blah. Who is today taking the lead? Perhaps the mayors, but the way they have started to address this is a purely punitive approach.
And an asymmetric approach. We see due to the Dieselgate, we see asymmetric sanctions, we see asymmetric driving bans, and they're trying to take some measures without the holistic idea.
Absolutely.
And this is why I mentioned before that we need a reorganization that is that needs a holistic approach in order to remain the democratization of mobility and even to enhance them, to integrate more user groups.
Sure.
Older people, children, handicapped people, people with special demands. And the word demands brings me to the next important aspect. The solutions I see coming after those bans, after the abandonment of vehicle ownership, which will be something, I mean, this will really change something in our lives. If we are living in cities and we have to abandon the ownership of vehicles. The solutions which are provided today don't meet the demand of the people. I want to be mobile in accordance with the occasion. If I go to an opera evening or in my evening gown, I don't want to go like this in the tram. If I meet you, I need a reliable, predictable solution. I want to be environmentally friendly. I want to consider our resources. I want to travel in accordance. I want to travel affordably, comfortable, safe. All has to be the same, like I experienced it before in my own car, flexibly. I want to travel flexibly. And in the end, there's one aspect nobody talks about. Mobility is still something status related. And status demonstration and demonstrative consumption is a part of the human being.
Sure.
The guy with the big car gets the date with the beautiful girl. I mean, sorry for saying this. This is maybe not very modern to talk about this stuff, but this is part of the human behavior. And we won't change the people, but we have to change the services for the people. I'm mentioning this because if you want to pull out the people of the 5-liter cars and the 5-meter SUVs, we have to offer them services that are end-to-end. And that make them feel that they can plan their trip, that they know they are safe. Even as a woman, you can travel the whole way without being scared.
It's quite easy for me to agree with you. And it's not about agreeing on the destination of what you are describing, because what we are describing is the destination that we want to reach. The problem we are facing is the how.
Yes.
And how do we reach that destination with all the attributes that you have described? What I would just want to share with you is that as we are only trying to find that destination that we are unable currently to describe, we are going there trying to be punitive, you don't do this, you don't do that, etc. But then we are not gathering all the creative power of human beings working different kinds of businesses today. And we already see in Paris, for instance, that there are too many two-wheelers that are abandoned on the sidewalks, and they are creating accidents on the sidewalks because they are too fast, or you find them in the Seine River at the end of the day. So this chaos is growing as a lack of vision and organization. And the question would be, who should take the lead to coordinate the best proposals from all these different stakeholders?
I tell you something, we just started such a project because nobody does it. And what we did is we identified in 18 different infrastructure sectors the most leading companies and solutions coming from Germany and parts of Europe. And we asked them to bring those solutions together. We started a study. This will be published end of this year. And our next step will be to integrate these solutions. We didn't bring competitors in this game. We just brought one provider per solution, and now we try to integrate the solutions, introduce them to the cities. Then the city should take over the lead and say, this is good for us, that is good for us. We need some other feature, please develop it for us, and then it can be implemented. I think, and this is the request I would like to bring in this conversation, I think to collaborate with networks like that will be very challenging for the car manufacturers. Because in the past, we had the brands and the shiny cars, and everything was so emotional. And when the car guy came in, everyone said, wow, he's the guy from this or that brand. And to come into a situation with smaller companies or companies with lower budgets and to speak with them on an eye level and to create solutions jointly and implement them, try something. This should be the fourth pillar in the car manufacturer's strategy. You have the car manufacturing, which changes itself. You have the data management, which is brand new. You have the mobility services, which are brand new, where you develop services as an intermediate or as someone who is the leader. But you also should join us in the endeavors to create integrated solution connected with other infrastructure sectors.
And you see, in fact, we are not so far away from what you described, perhaps to your big surprise. We have created in PSA a specific division for mobility services with a specific brand that is called, as you mentioned, Free2Move. In this division, we are developing not only the connected service, but also the mobility service under a marketing platform called Free2Move that gives you access to all sorts of different mobility services. Two-wheeler, bicycle, motorcycle, VTC, taxi, subway, car sharing, you name it. All of this can be accessed through this platform where once you are in, then we give you the choice based on the situation that you are actually living. Are you going to the opera? Are you going to a business meeting, etc., with all the attributes that you were describing? And you are right. I'd say the egos of the car makers are still there. But we made that kind of diagnosis, and we consider that if we were to create this mobility service division, of course, we are perfectly working with the ecosystem of many startups, and we try to enter those discussions in what you would call a less arrogant mode, which I completely understand.
I did not speak about
it's
arrogant.
Fine. It's fine. It's fine, but I can see the understatement. The point is, we are absolutely okay with that. You see, one of the things that I often think to myself is, if the citizens of European cities don't like big companies, well, just regulate the size of companies if you want. I mean, big companies are made of great people, humble people, expert people, people who have kids and grandkids. They want the best for the society. It's not because they are working in a big company that they are bad people or arrogant people.
Absolutely
no, they
not.
want to bring what they want to do.
Yeah.
And this Free2Move specific division is very, very well positioned to do this collaboration that you described. At the end of the day, we feel ourselves a little bit isolated and wrong-footed because of this pushback from Europe against the car makers, which I think is very counterproductive for the societies, because the societies should enjoy the great people we have and some of the ideas we have to contribute to that kind of specific network, integrated network for mobility. So we are not so far away.
But you know what? Actually, I'm collaborating primarily with huge corporations because they can leverage the developments. And I don't think that it's their personal attitude how they deal with the other people, but they are seen as something special. If the guy from PSA comes in, he's the one. I mean, this must not be your attitude, yeah? It's just the way people react on those corporations in any regard. And I know Free2Move, and I really appreciate this approach because I think you're also open to other companies to be integrated. But what I mentioned before is to do this, what you're doing within the mobility sector, over all different infrastructure sectors. We have to integrate the different infrastructures within a city. Mobility mobility, energy production, or energy consumption. We have to combine it maybe with the waste management. We have so many different infrastructure sectors which have to be integrated. We start within the sector, but we also should have a look at the other parts, because also your cars will be in future part of an urban infrastructure. It will be connected to so many different sectors that we have to consider that.
I think we can understand that and even envision that. Again, I think the real difficult part of the how here, and I'm putting aside all the business-related questions, what is going to be the sustainability of the company if we go in that direction. I put that aside. But we can bring ideas, solutions, great experts in many technology domains. Again, who is going to coordinate and bring all this good faith, good ideas, goodwill on the same direction for us to be able to build something?
External networks.
Sure.
And the external networks really need the car manufacturers, because you are the guys with the competencies, you have the developers in so many different regards, especially regarding the IT competencies, which you will need in future and already in any regard of your activities. That could help those networks so much to leverage the solutions that can be developed, or also your creative employees could support that.
Yeah, and they would be very proud of doing that. They would be extremely excited and proud of contributing to this kind of complex solution that is multimodal mobility solution in an urban area. I think they would be pleased to participate.
The thing is that within such teams, you need, on the one hand, an environment of trust. And on the other hand, everyone has to participate from the result. And it's very difficult to create such an environment, but I think you need people with empathy who are able to lead such heterogeneous teams. I mean, you have
diverse,
you have creative people, you have engineers, you have people coming from the waste management, other people come from the energy sector, and those are really different branches. And you need someone who is able to integrate their languages or their approaches and to encourage them to become creative. And this is a huge task.
I do believe it is, and the thing I would like just to state here is I think that the car makers are ready to move in that direction. I think that with the discussions I have with my peers from the Automotive European Association, I think everybody understands that we are moving in that direction, and that our people and our employees would be proud and excited to participate in this kind of direction. One question I wanted to raise, let's assume, because we are optimistic people, let's assume that somebody is able to describe what is a happy society which is low carbon footprint. Let's assume that we translate that in a lifestyle in an urban area that is also low carbon, happy society, full freedom of mobility, etc. Do we have the risk, from your perspective, that once we enter this world, the way we should be living in an urban area is completely defined by what some people would consider as being the right practices vis-à-vis the wrong practices in terms of whatever needs to be done in the society, vis-à-vis the planet, etc. Do you think there is a risk that at the end of the day, you only have one way of living, which is you do this, you travel like this, you eat like this, you sleep like this, and there is no other way of having a different kind of life? Do you think that's a risk we have or not?
This is a core question I'm dealing with. This is a governance question, actually.
Absolutely.
Because I had been traveling a lot, and I saw many different approaches to smart city development. And we had three core questions. The first question is, what is a smart city? The second question was, how can a smart city look like in different parts of the world? And the current question is, how should a smart city look like in Germany and Europe? And when I was answering the second question, I saw these different types of approaches, and we see some approaches which are very technology oriented, and many people say, and we see other approaches which are so customer centric, but this customer centered approach applies also to the technology approach, because all people in the world say that they do everything in order to create that better life. The question is, and this is the core question we have to answer now, how can we translate our way to life into the system? For example, in Asia, you see approaches which take a set of values and apply it into this, and put it into a system, and start assessments on the basis of that values. And I think that our task will be to understand what kind of pluralistic idea of the good life we have in Europe and translate it into the system. Because currently, we have some computer experts, some nerds, or some guys in Silicon Valley who never had been elected as a president or as a philosopher's king in the Aristotelian sense, or in any regard. They just have the capability to do something, to program solutions. And they decide today how the solutions will look like. And we have two chances. On the one hand, we can brief them and tell them what to do. On the other hand, we can at least say, we developed an attitude, how we want to live based on our vision, how we want to live tomorrow, and tell them what kind of terms and conditions we accept coming with those systems. And this is what I'm really asking for when it comes for the European future, to the European future, because we currently don't do that.
And your point is absolutely on the spot. It means that if we are talking about data management, value of data, and freedom of mobility, it's very easy at one point in time to come up with a system that describes reasonably precisely what you should be doing in an urban area and not doing in an urban area. Mm-hmm. And that is going to limit the flexibility of our lifestyles, because the data are there, so you can perfectly describe what your lifestyle is. Mobility is absolutely tracked unless you pay for privacy. At the end of the day, does this give the society in an urban area enough breathing space for people to be able to have their lifestyle? Artists, writers, people being in the business or something else. Do we give enough breathing space to the society?
This is exactly the attitude I'm talking about.
Which means what kind of governance?
The government has to decide how much flexibility we need to feel free, to feel...
Sure, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yes.
Sure. And then it's the legitimacy of the people who would decide that flexibility that is going to be, of course, the major topic.
I don't think it should be the private sector. That's another aspect.
Sure.
I think we have to agree as a society on how we want to develop. We need participative solutions to answer this question, how we want to live tomorrow. And on the other hand, the development of smart cities, for example, or smart city mobility or smart traffic is a task that should be under the leadership of municipalities, because they think much more in consequences than any private company. They have to, and they have the holistic view, and they know what the citizens need, and they know the special conditions of the city, and this is why we need to bring them in the situation to develop such approaches.
Right. I agree with you. At the same time, let's not forget that in our democratic regimes, you can be elected with 51 against 49, and you still may have 49% of people who don't agree with has been decided by the mayor that was elected with 51%. So this is such a sensitive issue, of course, in our societies, that I prefer not to be a politician. I prefer to be a business guy.
Same here.
I think it's much easier to be a business guy. But at the end of the day, what this demonstrates again, and I think that's perhaps one of the conclusions, is that the speed at which technology is now moving forward is much higher than the ability of any political leader to absorb the risks of side effects. So it is almost as if from time to time we have the responsibility to pause and say, look, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm going to be able to deliver in 5 years. So please tell me, start thinking about, if I was to deliver this in 5 years, what are the implications for the society? What are the implications for the freedom of mobility? What are the implications for the affordability? You see, it's very interesting to see that nowadays, and I was talking to some of the MPs in Brussels the other day, say what is absolutely striking is that there is no active listening across the different silos of the societies. Actually, European Parliament is not really willing to listen to the automotive industry because they think we are crooks. But we have tons of great people who could help find the best solutions with them. Because there is no active listening, then the probability that we find the best solution for the society in which we operate is not as high as it could be. And we are back to the governance factor. We are back to how can you anticipate what the technology will bring to you with all the good things, but also the side effects that you would like to control. To which extent are you setting the limits of on those side effects with some level of legitimacy vis-à-vis the people that have elected you? And I think so far this is still very open out there, and it means that perhaps in some areas we need to pause and say, well, this is what is going to happen. What do you think? Should we stop here, or should we develop in a different way?
But nobody will stop. Nobody will stop the development.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
No. If a researcher really has a vision, he will go for it.
So we need to ask politicians to go faster then?
No, I think we should choose a way around the core problem. No, I think we cannot expect the politicians to start such processes.
Okay.
They have to be elected. They have, most of the time, they have just 4 years. And in 4 years, you cannot do anything what is related to such a project.
Sure.
Because you could start the project, but that's it. I think the private sector has to open up, has to start to collaborate with different stakeholders, create a set of ideas. For example, like you start this free-to-move platform. This is a solution you provide to the urban space.
On the shelf.
You have it on the shelf. And on the other side, you can say, okay, we have this solution. What else can we do? Then you start to identify what solutions could be possible. Then we should start testing. And as soon as we have a set of solutions, we should introduce the set to the cities, ask the cities, what do you think about that? Like a little mock-up, yeah? And and they say, you know what, this won't work for us because this and that limitation will hinder us. But I don't see this openness within our society because in the past everyone was doing his own business, and we lived in a very competitive environment, and we still do. I mean, the competition is incredible.
We have been talking for an hour about all of these challenges. We didn't talk about sustainability of the companies. We didn't talk about profitability. We didn't talk about investment. We did not talk about resources that we need to use to reach those
reason. And the reason of the company.
Of course, the mission, of course. And you see, the raison d'être, the mission of PSA that we came up with very recently is to offer freedom of mobility.
This is wonderful, I saw it. Your strategy is...
Because we really fear, I mean, all the guys that have been in this industry for some time, we fear that many things right now that are aiming of fixing problems have a side effect, which is to limit the freedom of mobility of citizens. And we don't think that will work. We think that's a deadlock, because citizens will not accept to see their mobility be limited, and certainly not for economical reasons. That's what happened in France recently, as you know well, with the yellow jackets. There was an unfortunate increase in tax for fuel, and middle-class people revolted. because they understand that their freedom of mobility is part of their life. It's important for their life. So I think we are just calling here for more active listening in our societies, more active listening. We are calling here for more collaboration spirit, collaborative spirit. We are calling here for more leadership in the vision of how we want to organize our urban areas, and the technology is here to support that. Anyway, on the PSA side, I want to tell you that we are very open to that. Of course, as a car company, we are very hurt by many of the things that are said about the industry, and my people are hurt by some of the things that are said out there. But they are very mature people, they are good citizens, and they would like to collaborate, and I'm here to testify that PSA is ready to collaborate on those matters.
I absolutely agree on that, what you said. That is why I really appreciate that you invited me today, and that you're open to the people you're talking with within this sessions here, and that you're open to listen, and that you try to be challenged in some regards. This is exactly the way we need to proceed in order to design strategies which give a company the right to exist, to remain part of the society, and to take a responsibility within the society. Because this will be the new role of the OEMs, I think. You will become solution providers, you will become part of the urban infrastructure, and you need to be ready to fill out this role of responsibility. And I really like your approach, and I think your strategy to be part of the democratization process is a very good one. Yeah?
Thank you. I appreciate your support. I hope that we are going to bring you a few surprises very soon on the marketplace, both in services and in mobility devices. But anyway, I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for the deep and forward-looking thinking. I really appreciate your vision, and it was very enriching for me to get your input and try to steer the company in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you.